Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about each MLB team's worst contract. So, the key point with this is that a bad contract does not equal a bad player. They can still be a fantastic player, as we'll see with some of the guys on this list, but their numbers just aren't up to where they were expected when they were offered this contract. And another note, I did realize about halfway through writing all this that I should have just done it vertically. I initially intended on having 15 and 15, but I thought it could fit. I should have done it vertically, but have that for next time. So, to start off, first we have the Angels. So their contract I chose is Rendon. It's $245 million over 7 years for about $36,570,000 a year, and it goes until 2026. When this contract was offered, a lot of people had complaints because they should have been given contracts to pitchers. They didn't necessarily need another huge position player contract. And it's had mixed results so far. In 2020, he finished 10th in MVP, which isn't super high, but there's nothing wrong with that. Though in 2021, which was a full season, as we know, he only played 58 games. That's where he started to see the problems, whether he'd be able to stay on the field. Whether the contract was really worth it. And this season, he has been healthy the entire time, but he has a 116 OPS plus, which is decent. It's not the best, but the Angels lineup is so stacked that he's definitely not hurting them. And they have enough lineup protection around him that it's not a huge deal if he's not as peak performance. But contract-wise, he absolutely should be performing better for having a almost $37 million a year contract. Those numbers are not anywhere near what they should be. Through the whole contract, he has only a 120 OPS plus, only slightly higher than his of this season, and you cannot be paying $37 million to a 120 OPS player. He also only has 20 home runs over the contract so far and 3.5 WAR. But the 20 home runs and 3.5 WAR are over about the span of an entire season. He essentially played 160 games roughly with the Angels, so that's kind of where we're at with that. So next, we're on to the Astros. They don't really have very many bad contracts. They don't have too many guys extended much beyond this year. A lot of their contracts are pretty low. The only one that could really be considered bad is Maldonado. It's $5.5 million just for this year. There is an option for next year, but $5.5 million for most players is not going to be bad, but he has a 25 OPS plus, which is horrible, and that is in 34 games, so he's been playing the entire season. But yeah, 25 OPS plus and negative 0.6 WAR. No one expected anything from the Astros catcher position, but you still cannot have a player with 25 OPS playing every day. Next, we have Elvis Andrus on the Athletics. A lot of his contract was not on the A's, so the numbers I'll give are just for his time on the A's. But his contract itself is $120 million over 8 years for about $14 million per. It does expire this year, and there is an option for next year. So, but in his time at the A's, he has a 79 OPS plus and 0.9 WAR, which doesn't sound horrible for a player who's maybe supposed to have solid defense, but he has negative 14 DRS, so that's not even there either. There's really just no redeeming qualities of this contract. $14 million a year for 79 OPS and an average of negative 7 DRS a year. That's just not cutting it. That's a very bad contract that the A's took on. But they are tanking, so it doesn't really affect them as much. And his $14 million is their highest contract by $7 million. So that's part of the reason I chose him, even if his performance isn't really, really hurting them. It's more just that he's their highest contract by far, and he's not even doing well for a team that doesn't want to spend money in the first place. Next, we have the Blue Jays. They don't really have any notable, really, really albatross or just really bad contracts. But Ryu is who I chose for this. He is $80 million a year, or no, $80 million total, 4 years for $20 million. That expires in 2023, so he's this season and the next season left. Over the contract, he has a 109 ERA plus. That includes his third place Cy Young finish in 2019, or no, 2020, I believe. Yeah, 2020. And 4.5 WAR total over the contract. But this season, he was injured at first, but even when he has been pitching in, I think, his 5 starts, 71 ERA plus with a negative 0.2 WAR. So even the 5 games he has been on the field, he just has not been productive at all, and he's been a net negative for the team. So he's to turn that around and get closer to his 2018 and 2019 self. Next, we have the Braves. Again, they do their contracts quite well. They don't really have any super notable outstanding contracts. Ozuna is literally the only one. $65 million 4 years, at about $16 million a year, and they gave that to him after his really, really solid 2020 list in which he led the NL in home runs. That contract goes through 2024 and has an option for 2025. But for $16 million a year, he has a 73 OPS plus on this contract, a negative 0.8 WAR, and last year only played 48 games, obviously because of his domestic abuse stuff. But he hasn't been on the field much, and when he's been horrible. His career OPS plus was well above 100 every year, and then he got his contract after 2020, and it's just been really, really bad. 1 year it was, or either this year or last year it was 68, and then the other year it's 78 to bring him to about 73 total. So really not what you want to see from a player who's been so productive in the rest of his career. Next, we have the Brewers. The Brewers' contract would be Lorenzo Kane. For this one, I am a bit iffy about. It's $80 million over 5 years for $18 million a year, and it does expire this year. So his hitting is, over the length of the contract, he's actually had a 96 OPS plus, which is not horrible for him. For a defense first player, that's really not that bad. He's had 12 WAR. A lot of that is defensive WAR, though. The majority of it. He did win a Gold Glove in 2019, so 1 Gold Glove out of his 5 years so far. And he does have 50 DRS, which is extremely high. So that is where his value comes from. His value doesn't come from his hitting. The more reason I have this contract on here is because his OPS plus this season is 34, which is unserviceable for a team that's supposed to be winning their division and making a deep playoff push. That you can't have a 34 OPS plus from your players. Though, yeah, defensively, he's still fantastic. There's that. The Cardinals have Steven Matz, who they signed this year at Steve Cohen's annoyance. But they gave him $44 million over 4 years for $11 million a year, expires in 2025. Career-wise, he's had a 94 ERA plus, and this season he has a 64 ERA plus. So $11 million at this time, isn't. It's crazy that it isn't a lot when, in hockey, that's what the top players make. But in baseball, you have players like Matz who are pretty average throughout their career making that. So this season, like I said, he has a 64 ERA plus, a negative 0.5 WAR. So he has been a negative to his team. Though the $11 million a year isn't horrible, the Cardinals are just such a good organization that they know what to do with their contracts. They don't really have any outstanding bad contracts on their team. So Matz is the one that has to get picked for that. Hopefully he can turn it around. He still has 3 seasons after this one, so the Cardinals do need him to be productive in that time to make it worth it. Next we have the Cubs, which this one probably very expected. Jason Hayward, $184 million over 8 years for $22 million a year. It does expire next year, so they still have him for the rest of the season and the following. Over his contract, he has 86 OPS plus, which for someone who was touted as high as he was to be the next Willie Mays, which doesn't make any sense, but that's what people were saying. An 86 OPS plus over 7 seasons, really not what you wanted to see. In that time, he only has 9.1 WAR, so only about a little less than 2 WAR a season. In the last 2 seasons, he's missed 80 games. And last season, when he did play, he only had a 68 OPS plus, and this season, when he's played, he has a 58 OPS plus. Both of those are abysmal. They're probably only going to get worse. I can't imagine next year. I can very well see a buyout next year. I just can't see if 2 seasons in a row your OPS plus is that low. You miss so many games. I don't see how that could improve at this point. And this season, so far, he has a negative 0.4 WAR. Next, to the Diamondbacks. This contract isn't necessarily horrible. He is making it up for this year, but Madison Bumgarner got $85 million over 5 years for $17 million a year. That does expire in 2024. The first 2 seasons of his contract were not fantastic. It was looking like a disappointment. One of them, he had a 70 ERA plus. Though this season, he does have a 90 ERA plus. Or no, over the contract as a whole, he has a 90 ERA plus. This season, he's pitching pretty well. He's part of that really solid Diamondbacks rotation that's keeping them afloat this season. And over the contract, he also has 1.8 WAR. And that's not really what you want to see. But it's, for as much as he peaked with the Giants, it's not the biggest deal for him to be coming down to earth now. He's still had a fantastic career. Everyone recognizes that. Next, we have the Dodgers. The Dodgers technically do not have a single bad contract. I was not going to put Bauer on here because that doesn't count. But they don't have a bad contract. I just put David Price as the only possible one. And most of this contract, the Dodgers didn't even have him for, so they only paid him for 2 years of this. But $217 million over 7 years for $32 million a year for a former Cy Young winner, someone who's still quite productive. Certainly not bad, but while he's on the Dodgers, though, he only has a 106 ERA plus, 0.6 WAR, and he's pitched in 47 games, and 11 of them were starts. So he still has a above 100 ERA plus and a positive WAR. I mean, it's solid for them. They have so many pieces. Obviously, at $32 million, that's not nearly what you want, but the Dodgers can afford it. It's not going to hurt them. They still had room to go out and get all their other big players. It's just out of all their lengthy contracts that they have, a lot of their players are under contract, which is a big contrast of some of the other teams who I didn't technically put a player for because they just don't have any lengthy contracts. The Dodgers do have some, so I decided to pick Price out of that. Next, we have the Giants with Longoria, $100 million over 6 years, about $17 million a year, and expires 2022, but he has an option for next year. Only a 101 OPS plus, 6.2 WAR. Last season, he only played half the season. He played 81 games. This season, he's only played 13 games. So in the span where he could have played about 200 games, he's only played 94. That's not what you want to see. But again, Giants are making it work. This season, they're not playing as fantastic as they did last season, but they should still certainly be competing for a playoff spot come the end of the season. And for someone who had easily over 5 WAR season in Tampa, he got about 51 WAR in his 10 years in Tampa. To have only 6 WAR with the Giants in 6 seasons is not the best. I wish it would be a bit better. Then he could have definitely pushed his Hall of Fame chances a bit more, but that conversation definitely is not there with how he performed in his Giants contract. So the first team that I officially did not give a single bad contract to is the Guardians. Jose Ramirez is their only guy that's truly contracted for like multiple years. Obviously, his contract is fantastic. He took less money to stay in Cleveland, which I love. I love when players take less so then the team can build more around them, especially in salary cap sports. I'm not sure about NBA, but I know in NFL and NHL especially, with their salary caps, the more a player makes, the less their team has to actually build a productive team around them. So I think it's great when players take less, knowing that will help the team in the long run, and then they have a higher success of winning. But yeah, so the Guardians truly do not have any bad contracts. They essentially don't have anyone besides Jose Ramirez contracted, besides arbitration, for next year. So there's that. Next, we have the Mariners, who signed the Cy Young winner Robbie Ray to a 5-year, $115 million contract for $23 a year. This looked like a mistake as they signed it, because it's until 2026. He is almost 31 years old, and he really hadn't shown the Cy Young potential yet last season too much in other seasons, so it doesn't really make sense to give him that big of a contract. But this season he only has a 78 ERA plus, 0.1 WAR. Season's not really going as you hope. His ERA is high 4s. There's just not much to it. He's not pitching nearly as well as he was last year. Even if he recovers a bit, his season stats as a whole are showing to be certainly a lot worse than they were last season. Hopefully he can turn it around, but considering he's almost 31, I don't see much of that happening. Next we have Abisado Garcia, with the Marlins, $53 million over 4 years for $13 million a year. Expires in 2025. Though this year, his first year of the contract, he has a 50 OPS plus, negative .7 WAR, and he, just like Ray, is almost 31, and he's a 50 OPS plus. So, probably not too much sign of that turning around. Marlins still have him for 4 more years. Well, 3 more years, 3 more seasons. So, this contract probably will not age well. So, we'll see about that. The Mets, Francisco Lindor, is not necessarily a bad contract, but it is a mega contract for someone who didn't necessarily deserve a mega contract. $341 over 10 years for $34 million a season until 2031, not even this decade. So looking at his career stats, he has a 108 OPS plus, or no, those are the contract. Over his career, he has a 116 OPS plus, and this year and last year, his years with the Mets, 108 OPS plus, 4.5 WAR. So that, with a 116 career OPS plus, that's not really someone who you think would get a mega contract, but he did. We'll see how it goes. He still has 9 more seasons, and yeah. So hopefully his career 116 OPS plus goes up, but we shall see. Next, we have Strasbourg with the Nationals. Definitely the worst contract in all of MLB. Everyone knows that. $245 over 7 years, $35 million a year until 2026. He has pitched 7 games on this contract. 7. 2 in 2020 to a 44 ERA plus, 5 in 2021 to an 89 ERA plus, and 0 in 2022. And in total, negative .2 WAR. Abysmal contract. There's not really much more to say about that. The Orioles do not have a single bad contract. Because they don't really have any contracts. But next, the Padres have Hosmer, who before this season would easily have been up there with the very worst of contracts, but 144 over 8 years, $18 million a year until 2025. This season, though, he is playing well. Over the contract as a whole, 105 OPS plus, 4.3 WAR, 269 average, that's important, 65 home runs, that's also important. Though this season, 152 OPS plus, and a 331 average. So his average is up about 62 points, I believe. That's very significant. He's still producing well this season. And then his 65 home runs in his 5 years with the Padres is half of what he did in his 7 years with the Royals. So his home run power has significantly dropped as a whole. But then this season, at least, he is picking up that hitting production again. Hopefully he can continue that. Next, we have the Phillies with Real Muto. His $116 million contract over 5 years with $23 million a year. The largest AAV for a catching contract ever. Goes until 2025 over the contract. So this year, last year, 108 OPS plus, 4.7 WAR, which that from a catcher is pretty decent. 3 home runs though this season, which is on track for only half of what he hit last season. And he is 31, so contract's going to expire when he's 35. That's not really very good. Or maybe he'll be 34, 35. But having your starting catcher, you're paying $23 million a year, being that old, isn't really ideal. So I don't know how that'll age. Obviously, everyone wanted him back, but it wasn't necessarily the best move in hindsight. We'll see. The Pirates do not have a single bad contract. Their only contract is Bryant Hayes, who is on a very team-friendly 8.75, I believe, million a year. Next year, the Rangers with Simeon, 175 over 7, $25 million a year until 2028, where he will be almost 39. He is currently almost 32, and he's making $25 million a year starting this year. That is insane. He has a 47 OPS plus, 0.1 WAR, and 0 home runs. He broke the second baseman home run record last season. He has 0 home runs through over a quarter of this season. That's insane. He needs to pick it up. There's really no more justification. Obviously, the Rangers signed him long so that he would be good, or that he would still be there by the time the Rangers are good, but he's going to be part of the reason they might not get to be good. The Rays are the Rays, so they don't have a bad contract. Wander's contract is fantastic. They don't have a bad contract. The Red Sox, Sale, as much as it sucks, 145 over 5, $29 million a year. He has not played, which sucks. He'll be here until 2024. He has an option then. 9 games in 2021, 0 in 2022. Though in those 9 games last season, he has a 1.49 ERA plus. So he is very good when he's on the field. He's just not on the field. So that's the problem. So next we have the Rays with Moustakas. $64 million over 4 years, $16 million a season until 2023. So just this season, the next one. 82 OPS plus, negative 1.1 WAR, and last season he missed 100 games. So when he's been on the field, he isn't producing, and he's not even on the field that much. So it's just not a very good contract for the Reds. There's nothing much more to it. He's just not producing. The Rockies, Chris Bryant, probably the contract that was worst at first sight. 182 over 7 for $26 million a year, until 2028. He's money chasing. He already got his MVP. He got his World Series. He kind of did everything already. He just wants the money. The Rockies gave him that money, stupidly, but they did. He's only played 17 games this season, 86 OPS plus, just like Simeon has not hit a home run. And he only has 4 RBI in those 17 games, to a negative .2 WAR. So he hasn't been on the field. And the opposite of Sale, when he is on the field, he's not producing. Look at that. The Royals have Salvi. $82 million over 4, $20 million a year. That contract actually kicks in this season. So even though last season was his monster year, hitting more home runs than any other catcher, his contract doesn't kick in this year, where he's not having a fantastic year. 82 OPS plus, only 6 home runs, when last season he hit 48. He's on track for only about 20 home runs this season. Well less than half of what he hit last season. 0.5 WAR. He is 32, so he'll be 35 when this contract ends. He does have 2 DRS though, so he is positive in that regard. But as a catcher, you should definitely have a positive DRS, so it's not really saying much. Next we have the Tigers, who have Javi for 140 over 6 for $23.333 a year. Until 2027. 68 OPS plus, 0.3 WAR, 0 stolen bases, 0 attempts, 6 walks in over 40 games, 3 home runs, and 1 DRS. This contract hopefully will not turn into another albatross. They already have Miggy. Miggy's fantastic, but his contract is not. It's like Pujols. Anyway, Javi's contract didn't look horrible when he first got it. Obviously, it was a bit high, but, wasn't horrible for a Tigers who didn't have the highest payroll anyway. But he needs to turn it around. He still has a lot of time left on this contract. He still has 5 more seasons. He needs to get going. The Twins don't have a single bad contract. They're the highest payroll team without a bad contract. Buxton contract is fantastic. There's not much more to say about that. The White Sox released Dallas Keuchel today, but anyway, I still put him on here because by far he was still their worst contract, and they still have to pay him this contract. $56 million over 3 years, 18.5 until this season. Would have been the season regardless. And he did have an option, which obviously now they won't even get the chance to do because he is released. Over the contract, 90 ERA plus, though 2021 and 2022, 75 ERA plus. His 2020 was fantastic, Cy Young caliber, but then he completely fell off a cliff. A 49 ERA plus this season. Just unserviceable. Makes complete sense why they released him. They have enough other guys that they can deal for or bring up. They're fine. Yankees, finally. Garrett Cole. This is the case where a bad contract is not equal bad player. It's not even necessarily a bad contract. It's just a very large contract. 324 over 9 for $36 million a year until 2028. 133 ERA plus over the contract, which is very solid. But obviously a bit higher is maybe expected from Cole, though I still don't think really any Yankees fans are complaining about Cole. So maybe they'll complain about his wild card performance, but that might be literally it. 12K per 9, which is fantastic. He's played every single game he could, besides maybe 1 or 2 last season, but that's literally it. Played every game in 2020, every game so far this season, and maybe missed 1 or 2 last season, but that'd be it. So he's very consistently on the field, and he is consistently good. He was 4th in Cy Young in 2020 and 2nd in Cy Young last season. This season, he should still be right up there again. He should probably be top 3. I mean, a lot of the guys who are having super hot starts will probably fizzle out, but Cole is just consistently good, so he should be up there. But just because he's getting $36 million a year, he's not necessarily worth that much. Obviously, that's just an insane amount of money regardless. But I don't know. It could be justified, though. But the Yankees, the other potentially bad contract, if any, would be Stanton, but Stanton's still performing well, so I don't think that could be labeled as bad either. So that's what I think is the worst contract per team. Again, bad contract does not equal bad player. That's the key here. So yeah, a lot of these contracts do end this year, so hopefully they won't go to another team and get another bad contract. But if they do, good for the player. So yeah, that's all. Thank